In today's painting tutorial, we're going to cozy up, snuggle in, and paint our very own Horn of Plenty. This beloved centerpiece has its roots in ancient Greek and Roman lore. The word cornucopia comes from two Latin words, cornu meaning horn and copia meaning plenty. In Greek and Roman folklore, gods and goddesses were seen carrying an overflowing cornucopia. Gods and goddesses such as Hercules, Fortuna, and Demeter. It was portrayed as an actual animal horn taken from Amalthea, a goat goddess, nurse, and the foster mother of Zeus. According to ancient Greeks, Amalthea was feeding the baby Zeus when he ripped off one of her giant goat horns. This horn instantly began to emit a constant supply of nourishing food for baby Zeus. And that is how the Horn of Plenty became a symbol of wealth, prosperity, and abundance. This pagan symbol was then adopted by Christians and began being used in European festivals at harvest time. If you absolutely love painting food as much as I do, I think you're really going to enjoy this project. It's full of fun little details and plenty of ways that you can customize your own bountiful harvest. So let's zoom in, take a quick peek at our supplies, and paint our very own cornucopia. So we've zoomed in for a little bit more of a close-up view because today's project is all about these really fun details and textures. I don't know about you, but I really love painting food. So when one of you requested a cornucopia, I absolutely couldn't refuse. I have two versions here. This one is the original demo, and I spent quite a bit of time rendering the textures. And this one I actually didn't finish. I didn't put the little white on my gourd or put the tops back in some of the pumpkins, but I wanted to show you how fun this can be with our composition. It doesn't matter where we put our harvest bounty or the size of our horn, and the colors can be a bit different. I added a sunflower and some wheat coming through this one, so I want you to just relax, zone in, and have a lot of fun with today's composition. Let's go over our supplies. Make sure you have a paper towel and a big jar of water. For colors for today, we will be using a whole rainbow, cadmium red, a nice bright orange, medium yellow. You'll need a dark green like deep green permanent or hooker's green, some dark purple like prism violet, dioxazine purple. Today I have a deep violet, burnt umber brown, as well as some black and white. For brushes today, we'll be using a number 8 filbert, a number 6 bright, a number 6 round, and a number 1 round, a little 1/4 inch flat brush. I also recommend having a little number 6 round blender brush today. This brush is really fun for putting some of the highlights on at the end and these little kind of frosty details into our grapes. If you have a mop brush on hand, it can be really fun for feathering in the texture and color in our background. But if you don't have one, don't worry, we'll just put it on with our number 8 filbert. We're going to be doing some drawing today, so make sure you have a nice dark pencil or a white pencil. So a nice soft piece of charcoal or white chalk, which is also wonderful when we want to draw on a dark background. You can see the white chalk line here. It just doesn't show up very well for camera, so I'm going to use the dark one today. But if you're drawing at home, white chalk is really great. And then you don't have to worry about erasing anything. You can just rub it away with a little bit of water. So get yourself a drawing utensil. And for a substrate, I'm using a size 11 by 14 stretch canvas. I think this size is really small and cute, and it looks great when you have like a focal point wall. You can cluster a bunch of paintings hanging together. As always, I will be painting with my trusty blow dryer. This allows me to dry my layers faster to get on to the next step. Okay, that's it for supplies, so let's go right on in and launch into step 1. We're going to begin by painting this really rich, traditional, deep and dark background. So pour out some of your black, some of your burnt umber, into the tube, squeeze, some of your yellow, as well as some blobs of white. Grab your number 6 bright brush, and we're gonna make this kind of light sepia color, which is a combination of yellow, brown, and white. So we'll take a nice scoop of our brown, some white, and we'll get it to the value that we want, the lightness or darkness. I like this to be a nice kind of light to medium warm brown, and this is burnt umber on its own without any yellow, but I think it looks great warmed up with some yellow. And if you like a particular color and are trying to match it, know that your paint dries a little bit darker, but you can just hold the color over the area you're trying to match. Okay, so I like this color here. Now what I want to do is have a nice fade going from one side to the other, light to dark. And I'm going to leave the bottom third of the canvas here for the tabletop. So it's a rough third. I'm going to switch to a bigger brush, but for now I'm just going to take all the paint I had on my brush and wipe it off. Okay, I'm going to put my brush back in the water, give it a little rinse, and let's switch to a big brush, and we're going to move nice and fast and loose, and we're going to use a lot of paint. So I'm dipping my brush in the water, and I'm picking up really big globs of this color as I start to come over. If you like to wrap your colors around the side edges, you can do that as you paint along. Just shimmy some color down the side. And don't skimp on the paint here. Please pull on a nice thick, juicy layer. If we put it on too thin, you'll start to see the canvas come through. So if you apply for me, nice kind of big blobs of paint and then smoosh them around, we're gonna cover our canvas quite a bit better. So I'm gonna pull over this light color. The dark colors tend to take over, so I'm just gonna smooth this on. And if you have a mop brush or another big soft brush, we can use that to get a super smooth gradient. Okay, so coming over, and I'm pulling over a little bit more of this than I want because I'm gonna blend some of this pure brown into it. So I'm gonna add some brown. It's just plain burnt umber. That's why I pulled so much of the light color over, so I can really kind of smoosh this over. And right now the colors are just super wet and they're slipping all over the place. So I'm just gonna kind of apply the paint where I want it, and it gets easier to blend as the colors start to dry a little bit. So here we go. Coming over, and when I run out of paint, going into more of the pure dark brown this time. So kind of fading from the light color to the dark color. You want it to be a nice smooth ombre. So get your colors on the way you like them, and then you can grab a second brush. If you have a big flat brush like this, or a mop brush, what you do is you just push very lightly and just kind of tickle the surface of the paint, and we're going to smooth these colors together. I'm going to use my mop brush. Make sure that brush is dry, and this is going to help buff out any brush strokes. And here I come into the dark color. So when we use this kind of two brush technique for blending, it's nice to have a nice thick layer of paint on, because we're naturally, even though we're pushing very lightly, we're naturally going to pick up some of the paint and remove a little bit of it as we're blending over. So making sure we've got lots of paint is really nice. Sometimes I like to wipe my brush off. Okay. So I want you to brush this color on until you get a nice smooth blend the way you like it. I'm using the Liquitex Basics paints. They have pretty great coverage. But if you are working with paints and you don't like the coverage that you got and you find it's like really streaky, don't panic. Just take your blow dryer or let your paint dry naturally, and then you're just going to come in with a second coat until you get the coverage that you like in your painting. We are going to cover up a great deal of our background with our giant horns, so don't worry about it too much, but I want you to get a nice juicy layer until it's the way you like. And when you're ready, we're going to get down into some of these colors into our tabletop. So once again, use some of your light color on top. This nice light sepia. Back and forth, just carving up that tabletop for me. Right up to meet the first layer we put on. And this time I'm going to go side to side, side to side. And when you're ready, into some brown, side to side. Do some pure browns. And just relax. Blending is fun. Blending is big motions. You can even stand up. I stood up and I'm really working my arms side to side here. Moving my whole arm. I'm holding my brush far away and I'm just, side to side with that brush for me. Put some random streaks of the lighter color down below. Might even go into a little bit of black here. Kind of in the middle of the table, like a shadow under where a horn might be. Just keep it soft. Keep it blended. If you add black, I'm not going to mix it in too much. I don't want my whole table to turn gray, but having a nice shadowy area, again, right under where we want our horns sitting, and the horn is sitting down into the table a little bit. Okay. And when you're done, step back and make sure you've got all your colors where you want them to be. Again, a great deal of our background, we are going to cover it up, but I still want you to get it on where you want it. I want you to be happy with your browns. Now, we are going to dry this later, either with our blow dryer or we're going to let it dry naturally, and then we're going to sketch on our cornucopia, our horn of plenty, and we're going to fill it with all manner of harvest goodies. When your background is nice and dry, we're going to go ahead and sketch on the basic composition and shape of our horn of plenty and our bounty. Now, this is a recorded tutorial, so feel free to pause and paint at your own pace. When you're ready, grab yourself a pencil And we're going to sketch on the opening of the horn, and then we're going to swoop up our basket. Now this basket I've got really swooping up. This one I've got a little bit more, so the tip of the basket doesn't come quite as high up as this one. I was just playing around with different compositions and trying things that I thought I would like. I love the way the food is spilling out in this painting, but I love how big and bold everything is in this one. And drawing that horn a little bit bigger allowed me to squeeze in a lot more fruits and vegetables. So you can play around with your own composition, but they're all going to start with a nice kind of open oval shape. And if we cut our oval in half, notice that each of these ovals is a little bit on a slant. So it's not like totally up and down. It's a little bit on a slant. So wherever you have the opening of your horn, make sure it comes down a little bit. And what I usually do is roughly kind of sketch a little bit before I go ahead and commit to putting it onto the canvas. And then I'm just going to roughly sketch an oval shape that's on a little bit. It's not on a very big angle today, but I could change that. Just draw a little line down the center. There we go. Now we're talking. So here is the opening of our horn. And then we're going to draw a little rim around the outside, and this is going to be the outer edge of our basket. So give it a little lip. Give it a little lip. So I've gone for a bigger horn opening today, which means I've got a little bit less room on this side, but I've got a lot more room in the middle here. And then we're going to swoop our basket up and down. So our horn is going to come back and up. I know it's hard to see on the dark, but we're just coming back and down. Whoop, and down. So pinch it down so it gets a little smaller. And down and into the opening of our horn. There we go. There it is. So the glare can sometimes work for us. You can see the shape of the horn there. Once you get your horn on the way you like it, it's the really, really exciting part. We are going to start to fill our horns in with an entire bounty of food, of fruits and vegetables. I often like to stick with the things at the bottom before pulling the things on top of my cornucopia. And for these grapes, I think they look so good, just kind of spilling out of the horn. So I have my grapes kind of just, I'll draw a little shape. So like they're kind of coming out from the side of the horn and they're spilling out and then they flatten out onto the table. So this kind of shape here, out from the horn and spilling down, only we want to fill them in with little, circles and ovals. So you can actually start to draw some grapey shapes on here. So here they are, just spilling up and out. And it doesn't really matter where you start. I want you to just draw those little grapes on. Okay, up here they're kind of inside the basket, but then eventually they're going to start plopping out and draping down and on to the ground. Okay. So let's just roughen some of these grapey shapes, shall we? Okay. Got some grapes just spilling out onto the table. Big bunch of purpley grapes. They always remind me just of little cute toe beans, little edible jewels. So it doesn't really matter where you fill your basket with stuff. You can move stuff around. I like having a nice big pumpkin gourd to the right hand side to really fill in the composition. So a circle or an oval shape. And we want to draw some of these bigger things in front because we're definitely going to layer some other things over top. So I'm going to pull a little gourd in right here. And it could be a tall gourd, it could be a short back gourd. You know, you're always going to have you'll have a different amount of space than me in your canvas. So fit your gourd into the space on your canvas. We want to start with having a bit of an oval shape. And I started my pumpkin just a little bit above the grape. So it's kind of sitting back and behind on the table. So my grapes are here. My little pumpkin is sitting up a bit higher. So my grapes are here today. I'm going to put a little pumpkin right here. Right here. And it's going to do a little oval shape. Okay. And I kind of have it coming in behind my cornucopia a little bit. So here is going to be my pumpkin shape. And then I'm going to put a little kind of smile a little ways down into the pumpkin. And then I'm going to do a big, you know, maybe a big stubby top on it. A little something like this, you know, a little top. And pumpkins always have lines that kind of follow the curvature, a little something like that. I'm just going to start roughing in the basic composition. Okay. So there we go. That's great. Now, what else do we want to have in here? I love these little kind of nubbly, bubbly gourds. So I'm going to put one right here. It's in behind the grapes, but it's kind of coming in front of this pumpkin. And it's almost like a little oval shape, a little flattened oval shape. And here we're just kind of overlapping things for our basic drawing. So you've got to kind of pretend the basket isn't there. So I've got this little oval shape sitting flat on the table like this is sitting flat. And then to get that look of those nubbly gourds, we're going to put, we're going to have a little stem coming out from here. We want to draw this shape on, coming down like this, arc out, and then on the very opposite side, arc up, and then I'm going to come down, and these are going to be those bubbly kind of parts of the gourd. These are those sections that kind of bubble up and out. And later on we can put a little stem coming out of here too. But I love those little bubbly gourds. I usually put a couple of them into this painting. If you have a penchant for detail, you can do really, really small fruits like I did in this one and add a lot of them. If you want to have the cornucopia look with less work, just draw bigger fruits and only add a few of them into your painting. Okay, so you've got a little gourd happening here. Then I want to have a nice juicy apple on top of my grapes, and then I want a little bunch of green grapes kind of spilling out. So I'm going to put a little apple shape right here. So kind of like a circle shape. Put a little dot in the middle. That's kind of the bottom of the apple. And then I've got a little space in between this pumpkin and this apple. So I'm going to stick another little apple in here. And then maybe we'll have one of those really fun gourds. These gourds have 3 tones in them. They're kind of like a lemon lime, a dark green, and white, and they're striped, and stripes kind of bleed out, almost like little, they almost look like they're made of watercolor. They've got these super cool marks. They indent here. So here's our apple, here's our gourd. Let's pull a big green gourd up into the into our baskets. So I put a big one, right here. It's a bit bigger on the bottom. It's kind of coming in behind the apple. Maybe a little something like this. So a bit bigger on the bottom. It's kind of like a pear shape. And there it goes. And then I want to have some grapes kind of spilling from right here. Really just spilling out on top of this little pumpkin. So just like with this grape, I'm just going to draw some little circles here where my grapes are. They're going to kind of spill out and down on an angle like this. So I'm going to fill in this shape with some ovals, half circles, juicy grapes. Get some green grapes. The previous owner of the house that my hubby and I bought have a green grapevine. Always thought I liked purple grapes better, but now I'm converted. Green grapes are so sweet and juicy. So again, just this shape of grapes falling out of our cornucopias. Okay. And let's just keep filling the inside of our basket with this really rough drawing of our fruit and vegetable shapes. And we could have apples, pears, little pumpkins. You can even try to stick a corn in there if you like, or your favorite harvest treat. So I'm going to put another apple in here. I'll put another apple right here. And then I'm going to put a big pear. I have a big pear here. Put a little pumpkin in here. Maybe give it a few of those, sections. This one's kind of wedged up in between the pear. And over here, maybe we want another apple. I want another apple, and I love pears. I love pears a lot. So what do we do first? I'm going to do a pear, maybe lying on its side. Then, looks like I can just have a half an apple here. Here, I've got another pear. Maybe I'll put one more little apple up here. Okay. So, let me hold this up close. Again, just the basic drawing. Now, I think these little gourds are so cute, and this little gourd is drawn the exact same way as our pumpkin. I made him a little bit smaller. I'm not sure if I want one here. I think I do. So I'm going to draw this on. It's going to be a bit hard to see, but it's the same shape that we had here. So let me try to use a lighter pencil. So if I put one of those little guys on here, now it's essentially going to be the same thing as this nubbly bubbly pumpkin, where we'll have our circle or kind of squished oval shape here, and then we'll put a little dot in the middle, and here's our section. So we're going to draw one section arcing down, and then these sections arcing up, and then our gourd sections kind of keep coming around. Here's one, another one, and they're nubbly and bubbly. So here's one, and then this one kind of, so we still follow that circle shape, and then when we're ready, we'll pull a little stem on. Okay? So it may be hard to see my horn, but my horn is also right here. Now we may want to pull some stuff into the right-hand side of our table, kind of right under where our horn is sitting. I love dark colors, but it is a little hard to see, you know, the drawing on top of the dark area. So I'm going to switch to this light pencil for these really dark areas, and I'll keep holding it nice and close for you to see. Now in this painting, I kind of kept it a little bit similar in the center, and on this side I changed it quite a bit. So here I have 2 pieces of corn side by side, a pear, a pumpkin, and some leaves, and on this side I just had 2 pieces of corn and a little pumpkin, and the corn is lying a bit different. So here my corn pieces are lying side by side, and here I've got one kind of leaning up against the cornucopia and one kind of coming down. So if you wanted to have them side by side, that's easy. You've just got these cob shapes. If you want one coming up against the cornucopia, like lying on the table, this way we're going to have to draw it that way. So if you wanted this look, then we'll have our cob would be coming up here. And then we'd have our other cob in front here. Okay, I usually do them a bit more kind of flat at the end, and they're long, and they pinch down a little bit towards the tip of the cob. As you know, the sweetest kernels are at the tip, and then of course the corns run in rows. Now for the ends of those corns, you know, the little husks, the dried husks coming off, you can draw those in. You don't have to worry about too much detail. We're really going to make this painting come alive with texture. But if you want to draw some of these ends of the corn in, just because it will help you, you know, place other objects in your painting. See if you have any more room for anything else after you put these bits of corn in. You could always have, you know, a big pumpkin, you know, in behind one of these corns if you like the bigger pumpkin look. Or you could do another little itty bitty gourd like this, or one of these cute little light colored gourds. But I've got my little ends coming up. I might go with the little bitty gourd right in behind here. And I'm going to make it one of these nubbly bubbly gourds. We've done a couple of those now, so you've got this, you've got this. Just carve out those little sections for me, starting with the opposite sides, one coming down, one coming up, and then up and over we go. And then maybe a little end to this. I had some little maple leaves coming out. And the leaves I did really just the tips of the leaves. So kind of point, point, point. Okay. This one's on an angle. So point, point, point. Leaf coming out of my grape here. I might have a little maple leaf coming out here, just like this little guy. So let me hold this drawing up close. So we're just really roughing in those shapes. Just roughing in those shapes over our dark backgrounds. Don't worry about if you want some wheat coming out. We're just gonna paint that in, and I like kind of having it fill in this corner. I think it looks great there. If you want that little sunflower up there, so wait, that little sunflower, we're just going to do kind of a circle for the base, and we'll pull petals all around. So we don't have to draw the sunflower in. It's really easy to pull that on just in the paint. So draw on those fruits and vegetables for me, and when you're done, we're going to start filling them in. It's time to get in here with some little black details. So you may want to use a brush like your number 6 flat or your little number 1 round. And we're going to get right into our black paint here. We don't want to lose our drawing. So we're going to fill in some of these dark areas with black. And we're going to go around all our fruits and vegetables with a bit of a black layer. So I'm going to take this black around the rim. I'm going to stop where the fruits and veg start to really spill out here. I guess I've got this little apple starting to push and spill out. Here's the rim and the horn. So I'm just going to fill in around all around these fruits and veg. These black or really dark brown. This is the inside of our basket, so wherever I can, I'm trying to still follow that curvature of the basket. Then I'm going to come along the outer rim here. And no matter where your drawing was, I want you to try to keep the rim the same all the way around. Sometimes things look a bit different when you go to fill them in. Okay. And we're going to come around our basket, pinching it up to a little horn. Now my corn overlaps this, but we're gonna paint the basket first. That's why we paint what's in behind before we paint what's in front, so we can get it looking nice and natural. So we're going to fill in this black. As we're filling in our dark colors, we're going to start to break down these long sections that create the weave of the basket. And there's all kinds of different weaves, but my auntie actually had one just like this, so I'm quite fond of this weave. So we've got this one part of the basket that's really at the back, and so we're just seeing half of it. So the first part of the basket we're going to see is going to be a little row that comes down like this. And then another little row that gets smaller towards the back and you're going to get larger towards the front of the basket like this. We want to make sure that unless we're seeing kind of just half of it, that all of these sections are the same width when they get up here. So we're going to be kind of coming around our basket like this, bigger, and then this one's going to pinch right up into the tip here. Okay. So we really have these main 3 sections, maybe 4 pinching up into the tip. And this next section is a bit more underneath. It's curling under. Okay. So here's our black sections. And once you've got these black sections on, pause anytime you need to, then meet me back here when you're ready. We're going to start pulling in a little bit of the texture in the basket. So these sections are going to have little weave texture. So I'm going to do these little humps through here. And I'm just arcing my hand like this Okay, using that wrist. So here's one section. It's going to get us that fun weavy texture. And think of this as like a curved object, so everything's being curved. So when we get down here, our curve is going to be more to the, we want to follow the edge of the basket here. Okay. So when I'm coming down here, my lines are going to be a bit more on the downward angle of the opening of the basket. Little arcs. If you're using really thick paint, you can add a bit of water just to help this flow along. Okay. So a little something like this. My black paint is really shiny because it's wet, but here is what we've got going on. Okay. We also want to put the weave, and I've got kind of a coiling weave all around the basket's rim. So you know at the top, they're kind of arcing over this way. But once we get to the sides, you know, they're going to be arcing over this way, and this one's arcing up this way. So kind of coming around our circle. Creating our little basket weave. So slowly curving down, down. Okay, now the rest of this stuff is covered up by our Harvest Bounty spilling out. So you're going to get that on a little something like this. Okay? And then I want you to outline all of your fruits and vegetables with some of this dark color. This will just help us keep them a little bit more separated. Here's our big gourd. Pear on its side. Our bubbly, gourdy pumpkin. and even our little grapes. The black just adds a little bit of a shadow for us so that when we go over it with the color, we can kind of see this black through even when we coat it with color, and will give us a bit of form so we don't lose it as we're filling in all of the other things around our grapes. Okay. So just swoop around everything. This is a huge bunch of grapes, which is okay. Grapes are a fan favorite. And I'll even outline the little maple leaves. And this little nubbly guy. Now I'm not going to bother putting the stems on the gourds just yet. We do tend to lose the little details as we're filling all of these little fruits and veggies in. So the stems can wait till closer to the end. So just do your gourds for me for now without the stems, because I want to paint this area of the pumpkin in before we pull these little stems over top. And then I've got my little corn coming up here behind. He's overlapping a little bit with the basket. So I want to paint that basket in before we get the rest of this little corn in. The corn is another one of those textures that's super fun to paint. So you want to get at least one corn cob in there. I have the tops of my corn coming up in the little, they kind of come the little points at the end. If you want a sunflower at the top of your painting, we're going to take some dark brown. And I've just picked up my little number 6 flat brush here. And I'm just going to pull in a bit of an oval shape where I want the center to be. And add a bit of brown, a little bit of black. I want it just nice and dark. And I pull it pretty close to the top of the horn. A flattened oval shape, and then we'll pull some petals kind of coming up and we're kind of scooping around our sunflower. Okay, but this is all we're going to do for the black, and from here it's kind of like coloring in our fruits and vegetables, and we're going to start with a base color and then we're going to add highlights to it to really give these fruits and vegetables their texture and their shape. We do have quite a few fruits and vegetables overlapping our basket, and when we're painting a composition that's full of objects that are in front of each other, it's always good to paint the object in behind before painting the object in front whenever we can. So let's go ahead and start painting in our basket. I want to make sure that my blacks are dry on here. These baskets are the same color, except this basket I added a little bit more yellow into the color to make it a little bit warmer. This one is pretty much just the plain burnt umber and white. So you can choose if you want a warmer kind of straw-like texture or this color here. But we're going to start with some burnt umber. We're going to add a little bit of white. So kind of like this color that we mixed up here. This is not our most highlight color, this is sort of our medium color, so burnt umber, white, and again, if you want more of the warmer basket color, you add a little yellow, and that will make it more of that sepia color. So we're going to start with a medium color, and then when we're done that, we're going to add a highlight color, which is going to be the same color plus white. So make sure you have enough of your medium color to do the whole basket and add a highlight color. I like using a nice round brush to fill the basket in. So I'm going to rinse the black off my little round, and I'm going to come into this medium sepia color, and I'm just going to go just like we did before, letting some of that black shine through. And right up into the horn. So here we've got our little sections. You can leave some of the background color shine through because it's also brown, and so it's going to work with us. But we want to start popping this basket out from the background in a few layers. So here is the top of our basket. Again, following more of this kind of curve. I'm going to do this section. Right up into the tip of the basket. Letting that black stay nice and strong in between to create the recessed area in between these weaves. Okay? one's just brown and behind, so it's okay if it shows through. Now often in this section of the basket, which gets pretty low, I'll go right into some plain burnt umber and add a few more streaks in here. This one's really curving under the horn, so it's going to be in a bit more shadow. It's a bit more recessed in there. Once you've got the front of the basket done, we're going to go and do the rim around the basket in the same color. I often have to twirl my paintbrush to get the paint right onto the tip. So leave some of that black shine through, leave some of that background color shine through. I want you to go over the whole thing with your medium color. And once we've got the medium color on, we can come through with our highlight color. Pause the video anytime you need to. When we are coming through with the highlight color, so these sections are kind of like bubbled out, which is why they've got the shadow in between. So we want to pretend the light is kind of coming down. I like to pretend my light source is coming down this way. So the light is shining down here, and what it's going to do is hit the tops of these sections a bit more. So when I come in with a highlight color, I pull it predominantly down just from the top and I let it fade away. Same thing on here, but more highlight at the top, and then we're going to pull it down and through. So our highlight color is going to be whatever basket color we chose with a little bit more white into it. A little bit more white into it. And this time we're going to start right at the top of our shape. And we're going to pull down. Sometimes I can just get little taps in the basket as it gets back where it gets a bit smaller. So allowing these dark and medium colors to shine through is important too. Sometimes I find I really need to pull my brush down to a thin tip. Gets really kind of finicky in the little tips, the tip of the horn. So I just tap up in there to get some nubbly bubbly texture. As we're coming down to these segments of the basket that are towards the underside, sometimes I take a little bit of my light color and mix it with more of this medium color. You know, this whole section is going to be a little bit darker, a little bit more in the shadows. So I might just come back to that original medium color here. I just bought a new stool and it's already squeaky again. We want to pull some of these highlights into our horn rim. So with your little number 1 brush, we're going to do the same thing all the way around. I was quite loose with mine, but if you wanted to have these perfectly evenly spaced, like if you really love doing details that are symmetrical and that kind of thing, that would look really stunning too. Sometimes I just tap a bit more of this highlight. Remember, if our light source is coming from this way, it's going to hit the tops of things a little bit more. So allowing some of those original colors to shine through and then just weaving these strokes through. Now sometimes I'll even go in for a little bit of burnt umber, a bit of this color mixed into it so it's a little lighter, and I'll put a few little streaks on the inside of the basket, just kind of showing maybe a little bit of the weave coming through on the inside. So see, just here showing this side of the basket. So it's a circle, so it'll be coming around this way and here. Okay, and if you ever need to add any more of your dark colors in there, you do it in the same way. Just follow the pattern that we've set out here for ourselves. So sometimes I come in, maybe just a few of these little marks in here. And before we wrap up our basket, again, see if you want to add any darks back into your basket. Now, I really plunged this basket into darkness. I came in with some black and burnt umber, and I pulled from the bottom. So remember, the light's hitting the top, so I pulled up from the bottom here and a little bit down just at the edges of each of these to really carve out the texture, and I added a bit more black around the edge to get that really dramatic texture. I kind of like my weave today, but I want to show you how I did that. I just take that little round brush, little black, little burnt umber, add a little water, which will help your color flow if it's a bit thicker. Okay. So if you want to add some shadows back in, I like to start at the undercarriage and kind of stroke up, but not all the way. And you can also maybe come in a bit from the top, so leaving that center section so that's just an option if you want to get back into the shadows. You can tap in there, you can swirl in there. You can add a little bit more shadow around the brim here. I do really love doing details myself, so I find this a little bit irresistible. I always want to do some more little tweaks. Maybe it's time to stop buying my stool from Walmart. I've had the same stool for 10 years and I bought the same stool, but they are squeaky stools. Just ignore my squeaking. Okay. Once we have our baskets full of texture, we've gotten our nice weave into there, it's time to start filling in our fruits and veg. We are going to need little bits of all of our colors as we fill in our baskets. So pour out some of your red, orange, yellow, green, brown, and of course some of your purple. Just little bits of each of them. You can add more as you go. We'll be making several tints of our colors today, so also make sure you've got some little blobs of white close by. I've already got a couple, so I'll just add a few more. We want to paint the fruits and vegetables that are in behind before we paint the ones that are in front. And let's take a look at some of these. Okay, so no matter what we're painting in, all of our fruits and vegetables have a dark color, a shadow, in the pear it's this kind of greenish brown, and then a medium color, which is a shadow color plus white, and then highlight color. And in our pumpkins, we've got our shadow color in the areas that are kind of farthest away, which is kind of like a reddish orange, a medium color, which is a medium orange, and then a highlight color, which is a light yellow. The grape, it's dark purple, medium purple, and then a light purple. So all of these are going to have a shadow, a midtone, and a highlight. And let's start painting in some of our apples and gourds. So for these apples, we're going to use some plain red as our shadow color. And then we want to make almost like a peachy color for the medium color. So some white, some red, a little orange, and even a little yellow. So let's mix this light color together. So our apples are going to go shadow, midtone, and the highlight's going to be white or white with a bit of the midtone. So we've got these little ombres for all of our fruits and vegetables, and these are little tiny areas, so we want to use a little tiny brush. So I'm going to take some of this plain red into my apple here, and I'm going to start filling it in. Now apples have, we want to follow the curve of the apple. So apples have these striations down them a lot of the time. And you can paint right over that black, and it just gives it a bit of a darker color around the border of the apple. Then we've got these kind of like striations in the apple. So you can go into a bit of our mid-tone color or peachy color, and we can pull some of that, say around right where the top comes out of the apple, and then we can pull these little streaks through the apple just so that they're not solid red balls. So, we're not painting these as super duper close up apples, but we still want to create some of the realistic colors and textures into our apple. Now, after the red dries, you can even streak little bits of green into your apple if you like. Let's kind of get these little stripes in our apples. Now, if you want an even darker color in your apple, a nice way to darken red is to add a little bit of green. So I'm going to make an even darker shadow color for this fun transition. So you could take some red and go just a tip into some green, and you add that in, and it's going to turn our red into a really kind of burgundy brown color. It's a nice color. This is red with a pinch of green. So if you wanted to pull up some even darker shadow colors in apple, say around where the stem comes out. It's a little area, so we want to have just a tiny bit of paint on our brush. So let's do another apple. I'm going to start with a bit of the shadow color this time, and I'm going to pull it around the bottom of this apple here. And remember, we still have these streaks that are going to run along the apple like this. I'm just going to start with a bit of a darker color this time. Then I'm going to go into the red, because this red is really bright. Cadmium red is like so juicy, it's so bright. Okay, so following those streaks, and we do want to have some of our medium color in here, especially along here, along where the stem comes out. We'll pull like a little smiley face in and then pull it down. That's where the light's really going to hit our apple. And make sure you've got just a tiny bit of paint on your brush. You'll take a lot of it off, and we can even put a little bit of a highlight right kind of in behind. Okay, so here's our little apples. You know, we've got these streaks coming through them. You can pull a little bit, highlight right back here. So these almost follow the same shape as the pumpkins, only it's not really raised texture, it's just color texture in the apple. Okay, so what I'm hoping we get, even though this is not as detailed, we just did this tutorial called Chickadees and Apples, and we covered how to paint these really realistic looking apples where we went from bits of green into the peach and into the red, and really discussed how to make these juicy, juicy, shiny apples. And even though these are quite small, we are following the same principle, like the curvature of the shape, kind of a highlight right in front of where the stem comes out and a little in behind here. Okay. Now, I didn't bother adding any green into these apples just because they are so teeny tiny. But if you wanted to streak in some, it's a really light yellowish green after they dry, you can. But let's go ahead and fill in all of the apples while we've got our red kind of fresh on our palettes. I don't know about you, but I put 4 little apples in my painting today. So each of our apples is going to follow the same principle, the same shapes that we've been doing. Now I always like to put a really light highlight on the apple, but I find if I go right into the white, it looks a little bit unnatural. So after I fill in the base coat of all my apples, I like to put on, you see how this white highlight is surrounded by a little bit of this pink color? I do that so that it kind of blends in a little bit more. So I'm going to take kind of a lighter highlight color and I'm going to follow the same curvature. I'm just going to pull on a few little streaks down. So I'm kind of blending it in with this like peachy color a little, maybe a few brighter streaks. So this is the first apple I did and it's dry a little. So I'm going to pull on a little highlight here and I'm using, not pure white, I'm using this light peach color in between these two light peach colors. And you know, maybe having a few bolder streaks. And then this is the area I'm going to put a really white highlight in. I'm just kind of adding this peach before I go in for the white. So following the curvature of this apple and then, you know, brightening a few little streaks and really brightening this section here even more. And I'm just using again this peach color here. If that's too dark, you can add a bit more white to it, but okay. Now, when you're ready, you can go into a tiny, tiny bit of white, and then right in the middle of this lightest pink part, I sometimes put a little pure white. Really make those apples shine. So I know I'm really far away. So I've got the tiniest bit of white on my hand, like barely any. It's definitely not gobbed on. And then kind of right in the middle of this pink part, my pink is still a little bit wet. I'm gonna maybe a bit back here, just kind of tap it in. Now, if your paint is super wet, this won't stay, so you may want to wait a little, but you can try. Just push really light. You can try or you can wait. Some shiny, shiny apples in our harvest basket. Ah, oops. Was an unintentional highlight down here. All right, how about them apples? Now while we've got our reds out, if you put on some maple leaves, we can go into some of our pure red. I've got some little maple leaves kind of sitting under my cornucopia. You know, down on the table. I had one in this here, one here. Because our maple leaves are over a really dark table, we will need to have 2 coats of our red. It looks quite bright when you paint it in, but this is going to dry really, really dark, just like that first coat did in our basket. So I'm just going to get in a first coat. And you can do any kind of leaves, you know, if you've got more like oak trees or birch trees. Just love a good old red maple leaf. Even add some of this peachy color in here, maybe help block it out. The peach has a bit of white in it, and that will help me brighten this red without making it look too pink. And then I can add more red on top. So you can always use a lighter color to help block out a darker background. Okay. So we've got some little leaves, Take your time, pause anytime you need to. Let me hold this close so you can see what's happening. Oh, I think I had another little apple tucked in behind this pumpkin, but it's like this one here. It's just a little bit peeking out. So I did it quite dark. I did red with green. Yeah. This is a little shadow apple. It's a supporting act. It's not a main star of the basket. Okay. Now I want us to start putting a few coats into our pumpkins. So we're going to do a similar thing where we kind of make a variety of values of the same color to get our sheets to really pop out. And if you've been painting with me at all this winter, we've been painting a lot of these gourds. We're going to do another little food painting coming up. I just can't get enough of these little nubbly bubblies. But you can see where you've got the dark colors and then the light colors coming through. And they're so much fun to paint. We painted these in some little gnomes and some Halloween gnomes. We added these little bubbly gourds. So I'm a huge fan. I think they're so cute. So we have our orange color. Cadmium Orange is a nice orange, but it's really kind of like an acidic, cool orange. So I like to get some more neutral, dark oranges as well. So I'm going to take, this can be one of our main oranges, and let's take some of our orange and add a little bit of purple to it. That's going to create a nice dark orange, a little purple, even a little red into there. Purple, of course, has red in it, so it creates a nice dark color. And then for our light color, so here's our orange. Orange with purple makes an excellent dark orange. And for a light orange, I like to take a little orange, a little yellow, a lot of yellow, and add in a little white here. So this can be our nice highlight color for our pumpkin. Just a little white. So here we've got this nice spread of values between orange, darker orange, and lighter orange. So let's take a bit of our plain orange and we'll fill in the whole pumpkin with some of this plain orange. And orange is always a bit of a see-through color. And I'm doing this pumpkin first because this pumpkin is in behind both this little pumpkin and the grape. So this one's way in behind. So I'm going to start with just a coat of this orange right over those black outlines. The black outlines are nice because they just kind of peek through the see-through layers of acrylic paint and add a little bit of structure and depth. But we don't want this to look cartoon-like, so we don't want to have a full-on outline. So you're going to try to go over most of it. And I'm just going to do a nice thin coat in this plain orange. And we can do that with all of our pumpkins. We haven't put in any of the tops. I have a lot of charcoal in this pumpkin. It's turning my poor orange a little bit gray. So you should be able to see the black lines that you made through your orange. So just pull a thin coat on. If you use charcoal with me, it's going to blend into this first layer, but that's okay. This is just a base coat we're doing. Our little gourds. So here we go. And you can see my orange shining through even from a distance. Now this one I'm going to keep to be one of these nice whitish yellow ones. I have this little fellow up here. It's going to be a gourd. Little baby pumpkins. So just a thin layer to start. Yeah, I've got this little guy over here. Again, just a thin layer. I want to do this little pumpkin kind of first because my corn husk is going to overlap him a little. And you can use a little round brush if it gets you into these areas a little bit easier. But first things first, I want you to pull in a nice juicy layer of your plain orange. And then I actually like to go into a bit of a highlight color and pull it through the center of the gourd. So here we've got these sections. And again, the light's kind of hitting the top, and I've just got a little paint on my brush. So the sections are going to stay kind of dark where the black was. So I'm just going to take a bit of this highlight color and I'm going to work it into the sections. You can let those black lines kind of shine through for now. And feel free to use a little round brush. I'm actually just using the very corner of this square shape brush. But if you just use whatever brush you feel the most control, you get the most control with. Just going to come into these sections. A bit of this lighter color. Okay. And in this pumpkin here, kind of like the apples, I like to kind of come around the rim. This pumpkin doesn't have those deep divots like these guys did. So I'm going to highlight this one a bit more like I highlighted that apple. It's just a few striations coming through. A bit around the top. Okay. Well, I even want my little round brush for this tiny guy at the back. He's hard to get into. So for this little one, I definitely need my round brush. If you find you're lifting too much of your base coat, then you just wait until this first coat dries. A little more, you can blast it with your blow dryer. Now this color is really bright, but it's helping us block out our background, and we'll go over with some juicy oranges and shadows. My orange is my most see-through color in this painting, and it will be for you too. It's kind of across brands of paint. So we always want to be building up our pumpkins in some nice juicy layers. So here's that sort of first coat as we're building up some depth and dimension into our pumpkin shapes. Now we've got some shadows and we've got some highlights. What we don't have in our pumpkins yet is these really kind of rich, darker reds and oranges, so we'll have to wait till this part of our painting dries. But in the meantime, let's get the base coat into this cute little gourd. This little gourd, the base coat actually starts with a really, really pale yellow color. So I'm going to take some white and I'm going to add a little yellow. So it's almost like a cream color. And just like with our regular pumpkins, I'm going to fill in the sections, except I'm going to leave some of the dark black in between. And these kinds of gourds are actually really quite warty. So sometimes having a few extra nubbles and bubbles on the side or kind of tapping around at the edges makes these look a bit more realistic. So leave those black spaces kind of in between, and we'll pull our little segments in towards the center. Okay, so leave those black lines to help shape up this little gourd. And those black lines are actually really, really dark green. So fill in this little gourd, a little something like this with a pale cream color. And then you can go right in to some of your plain green, rinse all of the creamy color off of your brush. Have a nice little detail brush. And then we can tap over top of these little lines. I'm going to keep them really dark. I'm going to keep them green, and I'm just going to tap in here. Nice dark green color. Get little dabs and stuff. These are super warty, warty gourdies. There we go. Okay. Now this little gourd is almost done. It's going to need some little white highlights once this coat dries, and of course a little stem. But while we're waiting for this little fella to dry, the next thing I like to get onto is this big old gourd here. And I like to start by pulling the dark stripes down the gourd, and I like to use a really dark green. So I take my green, and you can darken your green by adding black to it, but I love darkening green by adding a tiny bit of red to it. So just like we made a dark red by adding a little bit of green, you can darken green by adding a bit of red. So here's my super dark green color, and adding a bit of red to green makes this really pretty. It's kind of like a forest green. Do you see this color? Yeah, this color. We're going to pull some skinny little stripes down this gourd. Kind of come from the top and down. And then another one. Get a little bit fatter towards the bottom of these stripes. And another, and they all kind of meet at the top. It's going to get really thin up here, really tiny, so use your tiniest brush that you have. So we'll hold this up close. So you want these little stripies, a little something like this. And I like to take some of this light yellow color, add a little bit of green. So you want to make a nice pale kind of medium yellowy green. And we're going to pull this in between these little stripes. So again, use the smallest brush you have. I like to do these little tapping textures because these light greens and dark greens kind of like bleed out into each other in this really cool little pattern. And now this is a good example of why you typically want to paint what's in behind first, because we've got this really nice looking apple here, and we've got to try to curve our gourd around it. I'm going to go back into my dark green. Give it another good coat. Make sure we've got some good stripes in here. And this will have a white highlight to really pop it out too, but this is the basic colors. Okay. Now I might want to come in with a little bit of one of my red colors and just clean up the edge. of where my gourd meets my apple. One of my favorite things to paint is the corn. We've got this little cob running alongside our corn of plenty. And in this painting I did all kind of golden and brown corn. But in this painting I included some of the purple and red corn. So corn comes in a much broader range of colors than a lot of people think. You can get red corn, purple corn, black corn, orange corn, yellow corn, of course peaches and cream corn. You've got your two-tone corn. So you can have a lot of fun with your corn colors. We do want to get it in those long rows. And I like to use black to separate my rows. So before we can fill in our corn cobs, let's add some little black rows in between our corn. So I'm going to take my small little number 6 flat brush, my little flat brush, and I'm just going to pull down some rows here into my corn. Try to make them symmetrical. So pulling down some more rows with that black. Now this corn is running this way, so we want to have some rows coming this way down our corn. And this corn's going to have some little husks coming off of it too. So just pulling some long straight rows down the corn that will help us when we go to fill in the light colors. So take your time with those rows. When you feel like you're ready to fill in your next fruit, we're going to get into our pears. Now there are two main types of pears. You've got your Bosc pears that are a little bit more brown, and you've got your Bartlett pears, which are a little bit more on the green side. My favorite are the Bosc pears. And you just add a bit more brown to your green when we're creating that look for the Bosc pears. So we want to start with some yellow and add some green. So you've got a nice yellowish green. And then we're going to go into our burnt umber, and this is our shadow color for our pears. And the more brown you add will determine whether you've got your Bartlett pears or your Bosc pears. Okay, so here's our shadow color, say. Then we're going to add a bit of white to that. For our medium color, this is it's more of a Bartlett color, so I'd add a bit more brown if I wanted this to be more of a Bosc pear. Brown, even a little bit of orange to warm it up. Okay. And then of course our highlight color is just an even whiter version of that. So here's our kind of gradation for our pear. And we can just fill the whole pear in with some of the shadow colors. So wipe off your brush, and we're sweeping around a little nice looking apples. So be careful around those little apples, and shadow color. We just had a pear harvest at our house here. Not our pears, these are our neighbor's pears. We're definitely going to put in some pear trees next year. I didn't think I liked pears, bad experience when I was a kid. But I got these pears and I poached the pears in wine and spices like cinnamon and cardamom and nutmeg and ginger and red wine, and I just simmered them and simmered them and simmered them. And they were the sweetest, most delicious dessert. So now I'm a huge pear fan. So let's pull the shadow color into our pears and then go right into our mid-tone. And pears have a big bum shape. So tap a little bit of this into the bum shape and a little bit of a skinny head shape. So the neck of the pear is going to get a little skinnier. And the highlights are going to sit on the high points of the pear. So this pear is kind of facing the other way where it's bigger and its end is up here and the neck of the pear is down here. Okay. And it will be a little bit easier to go in with a highlight color once this has dried a bit. I'm always a bit of an impatient painter. I want to see what it looks like. If you try to tap the highlight color in now, just if you smoosh it too much, it's going to all blend together. So I kind of just tap it with the surface of this brush. Yeah, that'll bring out, so I'm using this little highlight color we made, the bum of the pear and the neck of the pear. And then I wipe the excess paint off and I'm just tapping it with the brush a little. But that might be disaster, and then we may need to just wait until this dries. I've had it both ways. So if you're having it that way, it's okay to wait. Because we have a few more textures to fill in into our cornucopia anyway, including some highlights into our pumpkins and some low lights. They are starting to dry, but I desperately want to see some of the fun greens and purples that get into our grapes. For these green grapes, I smeared a really thin layer of some dark green over the whole area of where the grapes were, kind of like we did for this little pumpkin. And if you do a nice thin coat of a dark green, and I went with this pear green for the shadow color because the plain green's a little too green for grapes. Grapes have a nice kind of yellowy, warm green hue to them. So I like to pull in like a whole base color for the grape. And then come into a bit more of a medium color. So kind of like the pear color, maybe a little bit more green. And I'm going to use my number 12 round blender, but any brush, like a little round will do. And I'm just going to put, so you can see the dark shining through. Let's just tap some of the medium color into the center of some of these grapes. Let some of them be really, really bright and some of them be a little bit more pushed off into the distance. That's going to create the look of some of these being a little bit more forward, some of them being a bit more in behind. Okay, and of course we'll get in with a brighter color after these dry a little more even. These are the smallest little ones that we've painted yet, so again, sometimes it's best to wait for them to dry before putting in the highlight color. But I just couldn't bear to wait, so I tapped some of it in. Then I tapped the paint off my number 6 round blender, and I'm just going to gently kind of frost these grapes with this light color. Don't want it to look too much like polka dots. And we may choose to brighten these even more with some pure white at the end, but that's kind of like how we get the base coat in. And you guessed it, we'll do the same kind of technique for pulling in the purple color into the purple grapes. I'm using a deep violet color, which has a nice kind of reddish purple. But I'm going to add a little bit more red to this purple. And I'm going to smooth in a nice thin base coat of this color. Now dioxazine purple is very blue, and Prism Violet. I was using Prism Violet. You can have Concord grapes and add a bit of blue to them if you like. You know, they're black. There's grapes that are so, they're like a black-blue color. So depending on your favorite kind of grape, you can tint these either on the redder side or on the bluer side. Or just what color that you think looks best in your composition. Grapes come in, again, really, really reddish purple and then almost a blue color. And the Concord grapes have almost like a thick bluish black skin. So lots of variety with our grapes. Now when you've got your base coat on, we're going to do the same thing that we did with the green grapes, which is we are going to add a medium color and a little bit of a highlight color. So just smooth in a really thin layer of your purple until you can see the black close up when you're looking at it. And then let's mix our highlight color, which is of course going to be our grapey color, with some white. So just a little paint on there and into the centers of some of these grapes. Usually I apply the paint first and then I'll come back over it. Starting to build up some depth into the grapes. You can add an even lighter color, even some pure white, because the purple is still quite wet. So if you want to do a few little white dabs, if your purple is still wet, and then we can tap it into the grapes, blend it in right on the canvas. Okay. If you want to blend this in while the purples are still wet, you have to work a little bit quickly, okay? Juicy grapes. We're going to highlight all of these and we're going to do some more work into our pumpkins, but there's two parts of this painting that don't even have a coat on them, and they're both in the yellowish brown family, and that is our corn and our sunflower, and of course the wheat if we want to add it. So let's get into some of our yellow and yellowish brown details. So for the corn, I like to start with some yellow and some burnt umber, and I'm going to mix it together. This is quite dark, but when you add the white, you'll see the burnt umber has a nice neutralizing kind of shadowy effect on our yellow. And I like using this as the first kind of coat into the corn and then using brighter colors to pull out individual kernels. And this is such a small little detail. So let's get our little number 1 round brush and we'll go into this. We're going to kind of tap this darker yellow color through the rows of our corn. Okay, so here I've got a little cob. So here I've got a little cob of corn. And I've got my row coming through here. I've got my row through here. So I'm kind of doing lines, but I'm doing little taps. Letting some of those blacks and browns shine through in between the rows. This is a nice big piece of corn. It's a little late for corn, but you can dry corn. You can dry corn right on the cob. Okay, so just tapping in the rows, and this is my corn I've got kind of coming up alongside the basket. So we're going to do the same thing for our corn of cob that's lying on the ground here. So I'm going to come into this color and tap across this way. And don't worry about the black rows that you put on the first time. The colored rows here are the ones that really, really matter. So if your black lines weren't in great rows, use this as an opportunity to make nice straight rows running down your cob. The cob is growing. And those little blacks will show through. And they'll create some nice textures for us. I'm going to use a bit of the same color with some white in it. And I'm going to come up some of the husks coming out of the corn. I usually break them up into sections here. Peeling out of the ends of the corn. So just like coming right up and out of our corn. I don't want to pull in this one just yet. It's going to come over my little pumpkin, but pull out some husks here. Now another yellow detail will be pulling the leaves into our sunflowers. If you want a sunflower in your painting, and I think they look really, really lovely in here. We're going to use some of our plain medium yellow, but we need to add at least a little bit of white in there. Yellow is a really see-through color, so adding some white is going to help us kind of mask out the background. Now I've got the petals of this flower. The flower's kind of turned on its side, so got a little bit of a cup shape like this, and the flower's just coming from behind the basket. So I'm going to pull up a little petal that comes up to a tip here. Okay, so this is this first row of petals, and it kind of fills in all, you've got this little cup shape, it fills in all under there, but the petals come up to a tip and they start to fold out and open at the sides of the flower. And they're going to kind of come up and around the flower too. Okay. So of course they come all around the center of the flower. So we're blocking out a big golden sunflower sticking out from the top. And if the little number 1 round brush works a bit better for you for this, then you use that brush. And if the little, that's this guy. If you want a little pointy brush, you can use a bit of a lighter yellow. You'll see how see-through it is. So you can use a bit of a lighter yellow through the center of some of your petals once you've got them blocked out where you want them. Okay, and we can add some more juicy dark yellow into our petals too, but we want to use the white and the light yellow to really help create that shape for us. And I don't know about you, but I always end up going a bit over my little center when I'm pulling in that back row of petals, so just tap it back in here. Now we're getting down to our final tweaky deakies. If you want to add some little bits of wheat coming out of your basket, really filling in this area, we're going to use a color very much like we used for our original basket. So some white, some yellow, and some brown, but this color is going to be really, really light. So a light yellowish brown color. We need this to really pop out from our background. So think wheaty color. So light yellowish brown, and I like using kind of a square tipped brush to get thin lines. As long as you have a nice brush that pulls down and gets a nice sharp tip like this, these work really good. So pull it down, wipe into your light color, and we'll pull up a few stems. When making a straight line, really kind of pull that paint down, and don't hold your brush flat up and down. We want to turn it so it's a bit on its side, and then we'll pull up. You can even add a little water to your paint to help it flow. I'm going to pull up a few long skinny lines, and if you have a canvas that you don't really like you painted on it and you were unhappy with the result, then it can be really good to practice on one of those if straight lines is something that you're challenged with. And then once you get the right amount of, water in your paint, then you can kind of go all out on your actual painting. But you know, if you're really liking your painting so far, I don't want you to come in and do something and be like, oh, Jessie, I at the very last minute added some wheat and it ruined the whole thing. So be sure to practice on a small canvas with your straight lines. They are actually one of the hardest things to do in acrylic, so feel free to practice. But you are going to pull out some straight lines or little curvy lines as the foundation for the wheats. And then we want to put the germ on, the actual grain. And they're going to come out the tops of the sides of the wheat, almost like little V's. You could even use a smaller brush than a number 1 round. Use your smallest little brush that you have. This is a number 2 brush, but it's got a really nice tip on it. So it's not always the size, it's how good is your tip. I mangled a few of my tips when we were painting Van Gogh. So then you're just going to pull these little V shapes off the tips of your wheat. And you can have some curved down, behind. You don't have to have these little wheats, but I think they're sweet. And you can have them at all different layers. Like you could have a shorter wheat so the little bits are coming up down here. And depending on your character and the way you like to paint, you can get really detailed and paint every single stroke really detailed and slow. I tend to like to paint a bit more expressive and quickly, so there's no right way or wrong way. They both styles look amazing. It's just what do you feel like doing, or what do you feel like doing today? Get some little wheat bits sticking out. And anytime I do that, I need to touch up the little bum of my pear or whatever fruit I've got in behind. Now once you have all the parts of your painting on, it's all about highlighting and really getting our colors the way we want them. And I find especially in my pumpkins, I like to do a little extra with the color. So I'm going to come into some of this dark orange that we mixed with orange and purple. And I'm going to pull up some shadows in this color. So like the apples kind of around the bottom of the pumpkin, or in case of the little gourds, kind of through the sides of the gourds. So instead of it being pure black, we can use some of this orange mixed with purple to get this darker orange. And if like me, your colors are drying a little bit, let's just add a bit more to our palette. So you want to have some plain orange, and you want to have some of that orange that we mix with purple to get a nice orange purple, even a bit of red. Okay, so it's like a dark reddish, brownish, orangish, purplish color. Okay. So I want to come through some of the shadow parts on my pumpkin with this color. I love adding some extra layers into pumpkins because the orange really, really pops in this painting. So essentially I'm just going over the blacks, maybe some of the bottoms to see how the apple around the bottom, because the light's hitting at the top part of the pumpkin, the top and the top right hand side is where that light's going to hit. So when we painted some little gnomes with these little bumpy gourds for Halloween, and I actually had a neighbor gave me a pumpkin that they grew. So I had a pumpkin on the table, and you could see this was the shadow color in the crevices. So it's always nice to have a live model when you can. So this kind of painting, we've got a lot of little details, but it's so full of fun and juicy color. It's the kind of thing you can come back to if you need a bit more time. So I pulled my shadow color on. Now I'm going to take a bit of my pure cadmium orange and pull it right over top. And this is going to help get us those really, really bright orange colors. So I'm kind of just pulling the orange in between the shadow color. So, we've got our little shadow color in here. We had some of our highlight color. That original light yellowy highlight color kind of blocked out the dark background so that we could come in here and get some vibrant oranges. So the pumpkins have the most layers. I'm always pulling down, and we've gone over the black enough now that it doesn't look like it's outlined. It's just kind of hidden, still adding a bit of shadow and depth to these juicy layers of orange and red and yellow that we put in our pumpkins. And paintings, acrylic paintings, really get their juicy colors from this layering process. So while you can get away with one layer, adding more adds a lot of depth. And the cool thing about it is because it's kind of see-through layers, it looks different in different lighting. So I'm using a really, really bright light in my studio. But in the darker light or the golden light, it'll kind of shine through different layers on our painting and changing the look at different times of day, which is one of my favorite things. I want to add a little highlight into our pumpkin and then some little whites all over, and then we will be done for today. So I'm going to take the highlight color for the pumpkin should be a lighter yellow or orangish yellow. So I'm going to take some white into some of this. It was yellow, mostly yellow and white with a little orange. So it's kind of this pastel orange. I'm going to put a little highlight, just a couple into this big pumpkin, leaving some streaks of the darker color. Okay. And a few into the little sections at the top. And again, for these little sections, you may want to use your little number 1 round. So just mostly into the top of these little gourds. I know I keep saying that, but it's easy to forget where the light source is coming from if you can't see it. And just a little bit of paint, this is the smallest little space. So I'm just kind of coming into like the top of my gourd with a little bit of paint on my brush. Pulling it in, tapping it down, and if you need to grab some of the next color down on your palette, on your color wheel, if you need help kind of blending it out or something. Okay. Great. So take your time and fill in those juicy, juicy oranges. We're then going to take our black, put on our stems, and we'll just highlight everything, especially our corn and our grapes. So pull some black into your pumpkin stems. You can have big curly stems, I put a really big fat stem on this one. Actually, didn't even put a stem on this one. He needs a stem. And this one needs a stem. This little guy needs a stem. And this little guy needs a stem. Great. It is time to add some white highlights into our fruit and some really light highlights into our corn. So for that corn, you can get into some of this lighter. It's yellow with a little bit of burnt umber in it and lots of white. And we can come through and add some more individual kernels. And you can add other colors into here. Again, like this one, I added purple kernels. And I used purple with a little bit of cadmium red. But I'm just coming through my rows and leaving some spaces in between those kernels and really highlighting some of them. The light's shining at the top, so the bottom of our corn is going to be a bit more in shadow, so I'm going to stop the really bright highlighting. Go into some darker color down here. So just tapping the same as we did last time, creating little kernels, but this time using a brighter color. We can use some of these same beautiful weedy colors into our corn stalks, and I want to decide whether my corn is in behind or my pumpkin. I'm going to say my pumpkin's coming in front for this one, but then this corn is going to come in front of this. Some corn stalks in there. Now is the time to decide if you want some pure white highlights into your painting. And I usually have kind of a less is more approach with the white highlighting. We don't want to look like it's polka dots or stripes. So if you add some white highlights, and I did add some white ones into my grapes and both of these paintings, I want to show you where I added some white. I'm going to hold it really close and you can probably spot it. I added a little white in here. I added some white highlights into the gourd and just a few little ones into the grapes. A few little ones down the light centers of this gourd. But mostly I didn't add pure white. I didn't add pure white. If your fruits and veg are sticking out already from a distance, you might not need to add pure white. But to ensure that it doesn't look too strong, we can add a little bit of water or medium to make your white a little more see-through. And then we can tap off our brush. Make sure not to tap off on a dirty part of your napkin. And then we can just tap some highlights through. And I love adding some white into this little gourd here. I just kind of tap it right over the yellow and little dots. Again, this is a little warty little pumpkin. So I'm just tapping some highlights into this little gourd. And I think it makes it pop out and look really cute. I'm going to take some of this see-through white and maybe even have your round blender clean and ready to go, because the round blender can help smooth out the white if it gets too strong. So, and it doesn't have to be a round blender. You can use any small brush, but if you have to have like an emergency and take a little bit of the white away, you can. But I'm going to take some white, tap it off, then maybe just add a few highlights into a couple of these grapes. Either right in the center or a little on each edge. Frosty grapes, maybe a little pure white, even more highlight into that apple. You can always scrub it out with a clean, damp round blender. A little white can really make something pop. So don't be afraid to get in there, just maybe a little white into this pear. And it's nice and watery, so I can just kind of tap it in. Be a little bit to some of these grapes. I like to kind of look from a distance with these light highlights. And you can even use a bit of watery paint right on your round blender. Maybe we pull a couple. And we can either have some pure white or really light highlights into our corn. I'm actually just tapping straight up with this round blender through the rows of my corn. Some of the husks. Yeah, I was trying to be really controlled with my husks and I wasn't really happy with it, but I like being a bit more loose with them. Now, one other place a white highlight looks really, really great in this painting is through the light sections in our striated gourd and our striped green gourd in the center here. So with your little brush, pinch it down to a thin fin, and right in the light green part, starting from the top, I just kind of drag a bit of white down, and this can help pop out some of the texture in this gourd, because it is one of the more stunningly colored objects in our painting today. Okay. Adding highlights, or maybe another coat of red or orange to your leaves. These are our last minute tweaky deaky, so we're in the final steps of our painting. Something I often like to do is use some plain dark yellow into my sunflower leaves. It's a bit more of a natural color than the really, really light yellow. As you're finishing up your painting, whether it took you 2 hours or several days, I hope you enjoyed the process. Details is one of those things that you don't need to hurry. I have zoned in and worked on a small section like a pile of grapes for a week at a time until I got them looking totally fun and juicy. Painting is never a race. We should always take our time and paint at a rate that is helping us feel excited about painting and excited about learning. And it's definitely not a race. I hear some people say, oh, I took 6 days to do this tutorial, and that's fantastic. I do that all the time myself. You know, these tutorials I've curated, I've painted a few times so that we can do them in a timely manner. But when you're painting at home, just zone in and paint at whatever pace makes you feel happy. I actually wanted to show you one more thing, which is adding a few little green streaks into our pumpkin stems. You can actually make them look kind of curly or have different textures right into the stems after we get the black on. So I often come in with some green and a little tiny brush. And for instance, this one I like to think that it had kind of like the edge cut off the stem here. And then, you know, maybe give it a little texture with your greens. You can also take a light green and, you know, have the stem kind of curling up and over by putting in some little marks. And this will help these little stems kind of pop out from the background too. Yeah, just a couple little highlights in those stems. Okay, and that is the last step. Well, I hope you're feeling a bit more festive after painting your cornucopia. We've got some really fun, exciting projects coming up for the winter season, including this cute little stirring mouse, these winter birch trees, and these are part of 4 seasons of birch trees. We'll also be painting some more Christmas card classes. These are little 5x7 tutorials that you can paint right onto watercolor paper like this or on cards and send to your family and friends. I think hand-painted gifts are so wonderful at this time of year. We painted a little blue jay card class. It was super cute. And this is just one example of the card making tutorials that I like to do. One of my favorites coming up is this customizable project for your best friends. I'm going to show you multiple ways to paint hair and flesh tones to customize those cute little sweaters. And I just think the background is so fun and festive. So we're going to customize our own festive friends. And it wouldn't be complete without having at least one cute pudgy little Santa stuck in a Christmas tree. This is called Hurry Down the Chimney. So we've got these and a bunch more coming up. If you enjoyed this tutorial and would like to paint some more, I hope you will come and do some more festive projects with me. I would love to get to see your version of the Cornucopia. I have a special Facebook sharing group. It's full of other artists who do their own versions of these projects, and it's always really inspiring, and a great way to learn is by seeing what other people do and kind of adapting things into your own style, and we figure a lot of things out by learning from each other. So please feel free to join my group. It's a private group, so it's just us and a bunch of other artists sharing in there. If you share your project to your own social media profile, please tag me at keepitcolourful. That way I can find you and take a look at your painting, and if you would like, I can even repost it in my stories. Well, that is it for me, everyone. Take care. Bye.